All right, welcome back to Third String Podcast. I'm Zach here with my co-hosts Ishan and Pete. Guys, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Good to be back for another week with the triumvirate here.
That's right, the triumvirate. Yeah, it always is fun to do this with you guys. I think today we'll talk two topics. So maybe first, Super Bowl week here. The Super Bowl is coming up in a couple of days. Maybe we can just spend 10 minutes in our off the bench segment talking football, and then I want to transition into basketball. There's a lot of stuff going on in the NBA right now, a lot of stuff to talk about, some exciting things too with draft prospects in NCAA, so we can get to that conversation. But let's start off with football here. We have the Patriots and the Eagles facing off in the Super Bowl. I'm an obvious Eagles fan. To our listeners, if you want to read about some more of this matchup, you can go to medium.com/thirdstring, where Pete and I have a piece that we wrote looking at different aspects of this matchup and asking 5 different questions and answering those. You can check that out. But in the meantime, guys, your big predictions for Patriots-Eagles. First of all, who is going to win? What is the final score going to be? What do you think? Ishan?
I don't know. Let's let Pete go first.
I'm going 24-17 Eagles.
Okay, nice. I like it. Calling the upset. Right now, Eagles 4.5 points. 4.5 point favorites at most Vegas sports books. And of course, we talked about that with Uncle Saw on our last episode. He liked the Eagles too on this. So Ishan, I don't know, does that sway you one way or the other, Eagles versus Patriots?
I just want the Eagles to win so badly that
Yeah.
I'm scared to predict it. Sure, let's go Eagles 30-27.
Yeah, I have the same thing where I also, of course, want the Eagles to win so badly, but I am afraid that if I'm thinking too optimistically, it's only going to seal the Eagles' loss. Because it seems like every time a team thinks they have a game in hand against the Patriots, they're sorely mistaken, just like the Jaguars, who were up 20-10 going into the second half a week and a half ago. So, yeah, man, I don't know.
The Jags are a notoriously bad second half team. So I'm not gonna. I don't think you guys are gonna fall into that same trap that the Jags did. If you watch all the Jags playoff games this year, which is really all I watched, they were not a good second half team. Look at how much they let Pittsburgh come back into that game. Pittsburgh had no business being competitive with the Jags there down the stretch based on the way each team was playing. I think you guys have a better chance of holding strong.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm also just not convinced that, even if you take the second half out, I'm just not convinced the Jags were a good team. They played a soft schedule in a weak division with, Watson tearing his ACL. I don't think there's a lot of competition there. They didn't beat a lot of good teams. They got blown out by the 49ers in a game with huge playoff implications late in the season. So I think the Eagles were a lot better of a team than the Jags.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, a couple things. One, the AFC is the weaker conference, so the Jaguars coming out of there are, I think, going to be weaker than a lot of the NFC teams that are in the playoffs. I think that the Jaguars, I would disagree that they weren't a good team. I think they were a good team that showed the potential to be a great team, but at the end of the day, they have just a lot of young players and too much inexperience and immaturity, and they lack a quarterback who can play consistently in Blake Bortles. So, yeah, the Jaguars definitely got exposed there. But Pete, you bring up a good point about the second half team, because the Eagles are very different from the Jags in that way, in the sense that the Eagles, if you watch their games from this past season, I've watched all of them, they adjust in the second half extraordinarily well. And so they come out in the second half just as fast as they do, if not faster than in the first half. And they adjust to the way opposing defenses are playing them and the way opposing offenses are playing them. And the Patriots, of course, have been known for doing this for such a long time as well. So it'd be really interesting to see that chess match between Belichick and Peterson, especially in the second half of the game when things really start heating up, and see how each team adjusts and how that affects the dynamic. So I'm excited to see that. I think Doug Peterson is definitely a more flexible game planner than Doug Marrone in that sense.
I really have been thinking about it the past couple days. We were pretty all in on Sean McVay as the NFL Coach of the Year, and I think I'm still leaning in that direction for Coach of the Year, but I think we all really underestimated Doug Peterson, and I'm sure he has a fantastic staff backing him. I don't know as much about the staff as I'm sure you do, but boy, this Eagles team seems more well coached than really any other NFL team with the exception of the Patriots, and I would argue the Rams right now across the NFL. I have been really, really impressed. And just think about all those times when Eagles fans wanted that guy, what was his name? Ben McAdoo. How'd that turn out for the Giants? But boy, it worked out well in Philly.
Yeah, it sure did. I also thought Sean McVay would get the Coach of the Year just because as a rookie coach, he was doing so well and had turned the franchise around. But I think he lost that with his first playoff loss. And I think Doug Peterson sealed it with his NFC Championship blowout victory over the Vikings. So I was leaning that way, but I think Doug Peterson's just as deserving. I thought that way. I just thought that Sean McVay would end up with it because it's his first year versus Doug Peterson's second. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Pete. I think Doug Peterson's done an incredible job. And when Jeffrey Lurie, the owner of the Eagles, hired Doug Peterson, he touted Peterson's emotional intelligence. And the stuff that I've seen coming out of the locker room from all the beat reporters is that is definitely a view shared by a lot of the players there who say that Doug Peterson gets us. He knows how to inspire us. He knows how to push us and make us great. And yeah, it's definitely paid off on the field. And I think on top of that, people have underestimated Doug Peterson's, what they would call football IQ, right? Like his ability to understand and break down plays and opposing defenses and offenses. And he's done a really good job at that. And he's really never looked like he didn't have an answer for something or someone or some scheme. So yeah, credit to Peterson for that. He does have a really good staff, Jim Schwartz and Frank Reich, the defensive and offensive coordinators. The Eagles QB coach, John DeFilippo, is a really good coach and is a name being bandied about as the potential next Vikings offensive coordinator to replace Pat Shurmur, who went to the Giants. Mike Groh, their wide receivers coach, also very good. And he's done a lot to turn around Nelson Aguilar, who's had a fantastic year this year after really kind of being having a dud year his first couple years in the league. Alshon Jeffrey has been a difference maker there. Yeah, so a lot of respect to the coaching staff in Philadelphia and Doug Peterson at the helm. All right, so Ishan, you said you wanted to mention something about the Eagle or the Saints-Vikings game.
Yeah, this is kind of an outdated random thought, but as you guys know, Marcus Williams, the safety for the Saints, received a lot of criticism for that horrible last play of the game. Horrible from the Saints' perspective, very exciting from Minnesota's perspective. And I just thought that the criticism was totally misplaced in the sense that, like, to me, who really messed up on that play was the coaching staff for not having multiple guys deep there. And I actually thought Williams was in a really tough position where it was almost impossible for him to make a play that would have resulted in them winning the game. Almost impossible might be too far, but I think it was actually an extremely difficult play for him because when you look back at it, there were 5 seconds left when Diggs came down with the ball, and he was all his momentum was going towards out of bounds, and he was maybe 1.5 yards, 2 yards away from getting out of bounds. And if Diggs catches the ball and gets out of bounds, then they have a 48-yard field goal to win it, which, in the NFL is like a very high probability of winning. So Williams, what I thought he was doing was it was like a desperation play to get him down in bounds by going hard to the out of bounds side and trying to flip him over to land in the field of play, which would have ended the game because the Saints were out of timeouts. And then the problem was he got there too early, and he saw it would have been pass interference if he followed through with a hit. And of course, a pass interference also would have given them the ball at that spot with time to kick a field goal. So to me, it was like he was really close to a PI. He was really close to tackle out of bounds, both of which also would have resulted in them almost certainly losing the game. And so it was kind of like almost like a 1 in 10 probability of him making that tackle in bounds given the position he was put in, part of which was his own fault. He sort of overran the play. But given where he ended up, I thought it was actually like an extremely difficult play for him. So for me, it was like he messed up a really tough play, not like, oh, this is one of the worst plays of all time. So I thought that like they put their safety in a really bad spot. And then, he was like weeping into his hands in the locker room. And I was like, this isn't right. Like, not only does one play not lose the game, but that dude didn't even like lose that play by himself. It was like a team breakdown to put him in that spot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, they only had 2 safeties playing deep, and then they had their linebackers too shallow. They had their linebackers like on the 50-yard line, so Stephon Diggs caught that ball like 15 yards behind where their linebackers were, and they only rushed 4, or they rushed all 4 on that play, so that they couldn't pull anybody back into coverage. So it was kind of, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you that it was on the coaches. And I think your point about the PI is right. It looked like Marcus Williams did just get there too early, and he was trying to avoid the PI call and then just messed up his timing, and he kind of whiffed on the tackle when Stephon Diggs caught it. But yeah, you're right. Even if Williams makes that tackle, the Vikings can still win the game.
Just had to get that off my chest, but we can move on.
No, I like it. Okay, so one more question for me on the Patriots. So talking about legacy, does this game mean anything for the legacies of Brady and Belichick, do you guys think, or are their legacies pretty secure despite whatever happens on Sunday?
I think their legacies honestly are secure at this point. I mean, the amount of playoff appearances, the amount of Super Bowl appearances, the amount of Super Bowl wins. At this point, I think that we will talk badly about the Patriots if they lose this, that they looked past the game, they underestimated Philadelphia, which I don't really think that they're doing based on the way they're talking, kind of the press coming out of the Super Bowl coverage right now. But overall, I mean, you just look at how long they have sustained this, and they truly are the Alabama of professional football, or similar to the Yankees with their dominance, that the Brady Belichick combination, regardless who we have plugged in at running back, who has been on the offensive line, who's been the defensive secondary. I think Gronk and Amendola have been really important pieces, but who haven't been there for this entire run either. So you look at Brady and Belichick, I think they're set. I think even if they lose this game, I think it almost I don't know, makes them even more interesting because they're not just losing to Eli Manning. I mean, how often do we joke that Peyton could never beat Brady, but Eli sure could, and he was the Manning who had Brady's number. But it was two very, very lucky plays, if you remember both those Super Bowls against the Giants, that gave the Giants those victories over the Patriots, with the helmet catch and then that almost out of bounds catch. That was just incredible back in, what was that, the 2012 Super Bowl? So at this point, yeah. I don't think we can ever question realistically that this, I think, in my opinion, is the best team we've ever seen in the NFL. I know the game is different. I know the game favors offenses so much more. I know the Tuck rule is in honor of Brady. I know we all joke that the refs play and are paid by the Patriots. But at this point, there's no team that's more dominant. You look at that near perfect season they had before they lost to the Giants. I think that put them on the same level as the perfect Miami Dolphins. I don't see anything that realistically challenges them, and I don't see any other franchises at this point who are realistically close to being able to challenge that legacy.
I don't have anything deep to say about this. I can't really say anything objective about the Patriots.
This kind of turned into a Philly support group, didn't it?
I would cheer for basically any city again. I mean, yeah. I like Philly. Yeah. I like the Eagles, but it's more of an anti-Patriot support group from my side.
And I think that most of America feels that way. I saw this great article on BuzzFeed that first of all, the like that phrase coming out of my mouth that I saw a great article on BuzzFeed, that's never happened before, so this is the first thing.
Judged.
But let me just read this excerpt from a BuzzFeed opinion article by a guy named Tom McAllister, who's from Philly. He says, I'm going to read an extensive quote here. The New England Patriots are the only franchise that is regularly and credibly accused of systemic cheating. They are coached by a man who treats most conventions of simple humanity with contempt. Their star tight end, Rob Gronkowski, is a sentient LMFAO song who can't make it through an interview without giggling at the mention of the number 69. When he dreams, all he sees are commercials for new shows on Spike TV. Even before Tom Brady partnered with an obvious snake oil salesman, he'd become the Tom Cruise of the NFL. He's a great player, infuriatingly so, but over the past 5 years, he has become reclusive, standoffish, and undeniably weird. He has also spent most of last season with a red Make America Great Again hat conspicuously on display in his locker, but was too cowardly to speak about the hat or its implications. The Patriots have won more than anyone, and they've done it for nearly 2 decades. They've experienced every possible permutation of winning and done so with a joylessness and an arrogance that makes them impossible to like. To root for them in this game is to root for the 1%. We're living in an era of nearly unprecedented inequality, and choosing to support the Patriots in this environment is like being one of those people who spends all day on Twitter defending the honor of their favorite CEO. So,
woof.
He says, defeat evil and stand with Philadelphia. Resist the darkness.
It is kind of hilarious how Massachusetts was the only state where every single county voted for Clinton, and their best sports team has Brady, Gronk, the coach, and the owner are like all outspoken Trump supporters.
It is really odd, yeah. That's ironic. All right. Well, anyway, I think we can wrap up our Super Bowl stuff there. Let's move on to NBA stuff unless you guys have any objections.
Nope. Let's go.
So I feel like the first order of business is it's getting to that time of the season, late January, February, and March. There's a lot of college basketball on. And one of the fun things to watch about college basketball is the NBA draft prospects. So I thought we could give a quick breakdown of who the top guys are and how they've been doing and what my view is of these guys, and your view too, if you guys have developed a view.
Sure. Yeah, let me ask you this question. Who is your maybe top 3 prospects? Is that too many or too few?
No, that sounds like a good number.
All right, so who are your top 3 prospects?
Oof. So that's a tough question. So let me just give the candidates real quick. So the consensus candidates are looking at NBADraft.net. The top 7 guys listed here are DeAndre Ayton, the center from Arizona, Marvin Bagley III, the freshman power forward center at Duke, Michael Porter, who has not played except for a couple minutes this season for Missouri. He's a freshman shooting forward. Trae Young, the point guard from Oklahoma, who you guys know I'm obsessed with. Luka Doncic, I'm not really actually sure how you pronounce it. The 18-year-old Slovenian superstar. Mohamed Bamba, the very, very tall, long center for the
University
Texas
of
Longhorns.
Texas. That's right. Austin. Go Austin.
And then a recently rising prospect, Jaren Jackson Jr. of Michigan State. So right now, I think for me, clearly the top 2 guys in the draft, from my perspective, are Doncic, who I haven't unfortunately gotten to see that much of his games because they're in Europe and they're not on TV and they're at weird times. But apparently what he's doing as an 18-year-old in the Euro League is like pretty unprecedented. He's probably the best player in that league already, and he's like still a kid. And that's a league that's like close to the NBA, or the closest league to the NBA.
Right.
And usually the previous pro prospects from that league have not done anything like this at this age. So he's a special 6'7" passing, shooting forward who can score, do it all. Looking at some of his per 36 numbers, he's putting up 23 points, 8 rebounds, almost 7 assists. He's shooting 47% from the field, so he's already a special player. So I think having him number 1 or number 2, but then I would make a strong case for Trae Young as the other top guy in this draft, either number 1 or number 2. And I'll get into that in a minute. But for number 3, I think it's a tough call. I would probably put Ayton from Arizona third, just because I think his floor versus the floor of some of the other guys is a lot higher. I think worst case scenario, what you're going to get out of him, and it's like a very high quality NBA player, versus the floor of some of these top guys really kind of scares me, I would say. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts, or we should get into a discussion of all the guys.
Yeah, so the question I was going to ask you is Luka Doncic. I'm really intrigued by him. I was looking at his stats earlier today, actually, and they're very impressive. He's destroying the EuroLeague. He's clearly one of the best players there already, but it's really difficult, I think, to judge international talent like that, because it's the NBA of Europe, sure, but it's not the NBA, right? So I mean, how confident are you including him in your top 3? If you're a GM in an NBA front office, how confident are you actually drafting this guy if you have a lottery pick, because you haven't seen him actually play in a level of competition that you're familiar with? You know what I mean?
I think there's enough ex-NBA players and fringe NBA players in that league, and enough guys have come out of that league that's not so much of a concern anymore. I think I'm actually really comfortable. So I think with Doncic, the question is how much more growth he has left in him, because he's not that athletic. That's like a sort of stereotypical silly thing that a lot of guys say about extremely athletic European players like Lauri Markkanen, the rookie for the Bulls. But Doncic, in reality, doesn't have that much lateral quickness, doesn't really explode by people, and he hasn't been a very good defender. So I think there's some question as to whether he can be like a true superstar, the best guy on a team that wins a title. But I think it's difficult to imagine a situation where he's not a very high-level starter. So I think there's something about how you weight floor versus ceiling. I think you can make a case that Bagley might have the highest ceiling in the draft, but also, in my view, Bagley's floor is like not even a starter. I think if Bagley does not improve his jump shot, he's currently shooting, I think, 68% from the free throw line and 34% from 3. And already since he got to college, one thing that's really encouraging is his shooting form has gotten noticeably better. But right now he's putting up a lot of points with like these sort of dunks and floaters on littler college players that just aren't going to fly in the NBA. And I think the one thing about the current NBA is that it's really like the superstars, it's a guards league. Like I'm looking at the current all-star rosters, and every single one of the all-star bigs is not just passable as a shooter, but is actually like an outstanding, excellent shooter, except for one. So we got Cousins, Davis, Embiid, Al Horford, Karl Anthony Towns, Kristaps Porzingis, and Andre Drummond and LaMarcus Aldridge are the big guys, and Kevin Love are the big guys who made the All-Star team.
Yeah.
And Drummond's the only one of those guys who isn't like a superstar as a shooter. So I think for a guy like Bagley, to imagine him becoming a star, he's going to have to learn how to shoot because he's not going to overpower people in the NBA like he is in college. And so I'm just not sure. I think if he doesn't learn how to shoot, it's not even clear that he's a starter because he's not really a rim protector. It's just not. I'm not, with his level of athleticism and his sort of silky smooth game, you could see where he could become a superstar if his shot continues improving. And I think he could easily be the best guy at the draft. But I could also see him being kind of a bust, whereas I see very little bust potential out of Young, Doncic, and Ayton.
My question on Trae Young, this is maybe not a great comp, but when he started to sort of make his entry onto the scene and people started talking about Trae Young because he was lighting it up in a Steph Curry-esque way, the comparison that came to my mind was Buddy Hield. And Buddy Hield looked really good in college and similarly like wasn't on many people's radar until he started making a ton of threes in a Curry-esque way. And then he was drafted, and he's not really been great in the NBA. So what makes you think that Trae Young's floor is higher than what Buddy Hield's floor has been shown to be in the NBA?
So Buddy Hield, I think, first of all, wasn't that special as a freshman. It was his sophomore year when he really started to go on.
Yep.
But I think But I think that Buddy was he wasn't very athletic. He wasn't very quick. He wasn't a great ball handler. And he was shooting like normal college range threes. So he didn't have this aspect of like the consistent 35 footers that Young is putting up. So I think they're just really different players also. Buddy wasn't a point guard. He was more shooting coming off screens, whereas what Trae's doing is shooting off the dribble, coming off pick and rolls, which is a lot more rare and valuable of a skill. Also, Trae Young is explosively quick and a spectacular ball handler. Buddy didn't really have anything going for him besides being a shooter, but Trae Young is a complete basketball player. He's still got this problem with the turnovers, averaging over 5 turnovers a game. Definitely when he comes off the screen and gets trapped, he's been a little sloppy with the ball and lacks the size to get his passes out over longer defenders, which he's going to have to work on. But he's also a spectacular passer. Some of these, he's throwing one-handed, left-handed, right-handed passes across the court, hitting guys right in the chest for layups, dunks, open threes. So I'm not really that worried about the Buddy comparison. I think it's always hard to be a superstar when you're 6'0" and he's not very big. But I think that Trae is the closest thing to Steph we've ever seen. He's actually much better as a freshman than Steph was as a freshman. Yeah. Not to say that means he'll be better in the end. And also, he's a much better passer than Steph was, honestly, until probably Steph's like third year in the NBA. And so my view, as you guys know, I'm sort of a Steph obsessive. I made my now wife watch a bunch of Steph YouTube videos on our first date 9 years ago. But Steph, like, if you look at the Warriors, I think it's still underrated, the impact he has on that team. They're 9.9 points per 100 better with Steph on the court than on the bench, despite the fact that they have all those other superstars. They're only 3 points better with KD on the court than KD on the bench. And I put together, I think I might have already said these stats on the podcast before. I put together some stats, on-off numbers for Steph and the other 3 superstars for the Warriors real quick from last season, just to give you an idea of how crucial he is to their dominance. So let me just list these real quick. But last year, so with all 4 superstars, the Warriors were plus 24.1. That's Steph, Clay, Draymond, and Durant. They were plus 24 per 100 possessions. With Curry and Durant, they were plus 20. With Curry without Durant, they were still plus 16. Curry without Draymond, they were still plus 16. Curry without Draymond or Durant, they were still plus 12.6. And Curry without any of the other 3 stars, they were still plus 13.1. So with Steph on the court, with any combination of the other stars sitting, they were always the best team in the NBA per 100 possessions. But without Steph, no combination of the other superstars was better than plus 4.9. So Durant, Clay, and Draymond on the court with no Steph, they were plus 4.8 per 100 possessions, and Durant and Draymond with no Steph were plus 4.9. But like, they're basically, the lineup data just shows that the Warriors are dominant because of Steph.
Right.
Still, even with KD. And what Trae is doing right now, shooting contested off the dribble 35-footers consistently and still hitting 41% of his threes, is just, not only is it more fun to watch, in my opinion, than anything else in sports right now, it's also, I think he's got that. If he could turn into 90% of Steph, then he's a Hall of Famer and his team's a title contender with, even average players around him. So that's how I feel. I feel like the bigs, Ayton is definitely going to be an NBA starter. He's going to block shots. He's going to rebound. He's going to be a monster down there. He's got a little bit of a jump shot going if he gets that up. Because, guys like Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Davis, they were only okay shooters as freshmen in college too. So like Ayton, Bagley, if they can get the jump shot up. Jaren Jackson Jr. is another guy I'm looking at. He's shooting 44% on threes. He's hitting over a 3 a game as compared to the other centers, and he's blocking 3.4 shots. So that's the kind of like shooting athleticism combination that big men are really dominating with in the NBA these days. And so I think, it wouldn't surprise me if Jackson ended up being the best big from this class. But I think just in general, if you're between two guys, you got to lean guard the way the NBA is right now.
Yeah, I want to go back to the Trae Young, Steph Curry thing real quick, and then we should move on and talk some other storylines in the NBA right now. But you mentioned Trae Young's playing better now than Curry did in his freshman year of college. I'm looking at stats right now comparing Curry's junior year, his third and last year at Davidson in the Southern Conference, and Trae Young this year. So his junior year, third and final year at Davidson, Curry was playing 34 minutes a game. Trae Young is playing 35. Curry was shooting 454 from the field. Trae Young is shooting 452, so pretty much identical. Curry was making 10.3 2-point attempts. Trae's attempting 9.3 at a 500 clip when Curry was at a 519 clip. Trae's attempting 10.5 3-pointers and making 4.3. Curry was attempting 9.9 and making 3.8. So these numbers are all remarkably similar. And same thing with their rebound numbers, their assists, steals. They both had turnovers above 3.5. Trae's at 5.3 and Curry was at 3.7. But remarkably similar players, similar stat lines. And that's even with Curry playing in, I think, what everyone would acknowledge is a weaker conference too. So I'm excited about
a much
Trae Young.
weaker conference.
Yeah, I'm really excited about Trae Young.
Also, Trae's averaging 4 more assists than Steph did as a junior, and he's 2 years younger. I mean, so Steph grew from a superstar college player into one of the best NBA players of all time, and like that growth is not guaranteed for Trae Young. So this doesn't mean Trae is going to be better than Steph.
Definitely, but it does get people excited, and I think with good reason.
I literally have been watching Trae Young YouTube videos before I go to bed because they make me so happy.
That's awesome. Should we talk about some other things in the NBA right now, though? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Ishan and Pete, on the Cavs right now and what in the world is going on. Of course, Kevin Love now out 6 to 8 weeks with a broken hand, and this just adds to the tumult and the drama in Cleveland right now. What's going on? What's happening? What is the future of the Cavs in the Eastern Conference this year?
I think we should kick it to Pete. He might have had some thoughts on the draft too that we missed.
We can circle back to a couple of those during garbage time. I do have just a couple observations just listening to that talk that I want to throw out there before we leave the crowd today. So I'll pile a couple of those on in garbage time. But with the Cavs, I was actually I was reading a lot about the Cavs, and I've been watching a lot of their games on ESPN the last couple weeks. You guys know I'm a big LeBron James fan, so it's something I am absolutely always interested in when he's on TV. And I thought back to the discussion that we had with you, Ishan, back in late November, early December, specifically about the Cavs. And I was still pretty big on the Cavs, and I still really thought that they were going to turn it on and be good to go. And Ishan, as I remember, you kind of backed me off of that observation, and you had a different thought. And watching that team specifically over the last week, watching that god awful loss to Oklahoma City, where they lost, where they gave up 150 points to Oak City, bad loss at San Antonio, calling team meetings in the locker room where they're diming out Kevin Love before he breaks his hand. It kind of all occurred to me as I was watching it that the body language of LeBron James is something I have never seen before. He just does not look interested in being in Cleveland. I don't know if he's tired. I don't know if this team just doesn't have the spark, but all of a sudden I could not see any way that the Cleveland Cavaliers right now make any kind of a run in the East in the Eastern Conference in the playoffs. I mean, they'll make the playoffs, but I think they're going to be lucky to be a 3 seed at this point. And I think it's just clear that that LeBron can't fix everything. I don't really think he's interested in fixing everything at this point. I think he's already starting to look towards his next team, probably whoever that's going to be. And how bad does that IT trade look at this point with how well the Celtics are playing and how much the Cavs are struggling? So it's been a little disappointing as a LeBron James fan to kind of watch that team implode. But I don't really see a way that this is getting better in Cleveland, especially now that Kevin Love's out. I know that Kevin Love did not have the hearts and minds of the Cleveland bench, nor the Cleveland faithful. But this team, it's just not even fun to watch at this point. I think the All-Star game is going to be the most fun we see LeBron James have this year. Dwayne Wade is still playing too much. The old guys are finally looking old in Cleveland. So I'm a little down on the Cavs right now. How about you guys?
Their defensive rating, which is currently, as of this podcast, 30th and last in the NBA at 109.8 points per 100 possessions given up, is worse than the 2012 lockout year Bobcats that went 7-59.
Ooh.
Another interesting stat about the Cavs is that their net rating with LeBron James on the bench is plus 1.9 points per 100 possessions, and their net rating with LeBron James on the court is minus 0.4 points per 100 possessions. So they're 2.3 points better per 100 with LeBron on the bench than with LeBron on the court.
Real difference maker.
Obviously, that stat is like a little polluted because he sits when the other team's bench players are in, and he plays against the other team's starters. But looking at other superstars in the NBA, that stat usually goes the right way. Like the Timberwolves are 15.5 better when Jimmy Butler's in the game than when he's on the bench. The Bucks are 13.7 better when Giannis is in the game than when he's on the bench. Last year the Cavs were 19 better with LeBron in the game than with LeBron on the bench. So I think there's a lot of what is everyone else doing wrong? And obviously everyone on the Cavs is playing badly, but LeBron James is like flat out not playing defense. I'm watching actually the Cavs play right now, and I'm observing him not playing defense as we speak. And so it's a team-wide problem. And I think the way we know it's a real problem is like Pete was talking about, the locker room breakdowns are just gross. Did you guys see Kevin Love after IT and Dwayne Wade attacked him in the locker room a week ago? To start off their next game, Kevin Love caught a rebound and bent over 90 degrees at the waist to hand it to IT to make fun of how short he is.
I didn't see that. That's awesome.
The game on TV. It's like total meltdown mode.
Wow.
There's been some interesting, I know we'll talk about this here in a couple minutes. There's been some interesting in-game dramatics in the NBA this year that I think we need to talk about, but that's a great example. That Cleveland team, I mean, the reports coming out about that team meeting where they were saying Kevin Love wasn't actually sick and he was just mailing it in. Like, my goodness. One, it's upsetting that that's happening, I'm sure, if you're a huge Cleveland fan. But two, why the heck do I know what's being discussed in team meetings as a fan of the NBA who watches it on TV and catches the highlights? Like, why is that stuff becoming public? How is the breakdown in that locker room so bad that they can't even keep that drama internal to themselves right now? There is no loyalty to the organization, is how it appears to me. I'm sure there is, but it just seems like everyone's already calling it a day in Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts. One,
go.
I think Kevin Love, I mean, to the extent that it can never be good timing to break your hand, I think this is kind of good timing for Love because he was having to defend himself to the team for being sick when they were challenging him. I think they had that meeting like the Monday before last. So now no one's going to question a broken hand. Maybe it'll give the Cavs an impetus. Maybe it'll just cause their implosion to accelerate. I don't know. But in some ways, it's fortuitous timing, I think. The second is, question for you guys. Bill Simmons thinks LeBron is going to the Lakers. Do you buy this?
No way.
Why not?
KD didn't even take a meeting with the Lakers because that Lakers team is not winning a title, and LeBron wants to win a title. He's going to the Rockets or Spurs.
Okay. LeBron in San Antonio would be really interesting. I don't know.
I don't think he. Oh, I'm trying to think how I want to say this with San Antonio. I would love to see him in San Antonio because I like LeBron. I love Pops. I love the San Antonio organization. They don't really seem to fit to me. That's not really the style
that's
of
my
play
hesitation. I don't really see LeBron fitting in the San Antonio culture.
Yeah, talk about trust the system. That's I love LeBron. That's not really what LeBron does.
And I think LeBron's the best player in the NBA, or at least he's top 3. And I think the Spurs are built around like top 20 guys, like top 10, top 20 guys, because their system is built so that there's not one singular personality like on whom the fortunes of the rest of the team rise and fall.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think LeBron wouldn't go there.
I do want to say that I do think that Kawhi is definitely a top 3 or 4 all-around player. I think last year there's a strong case he was the best player in the NBA.
Okay, yeah. So I agree with you there, but the difference I think is that Kawhi doesn't have the personality of someone who's top 3, top 4. Like he's a very reclusive guy. You know,
for sure.
You know, the Spurs have his like best friend there to kind of help reach Kawhi, I guess. Like he spends most of his time with his mom. I was talking to a Spurs fan friend of mine who was telling me all about this stuff, and like Kawhi's been very difficult for the Spurs to reach, like on an emotional level, and he doesn't hang out with his teammates and everything. So I think even though he's really, really good, he's not the same like distraction to the program that a LeBron type personality would be.
He's also not a ball dominant offensive player, which I think
definitely
is like underlying a lot of what you're.
Yes.
That's the weird thing about offense is that people think that guys who get a lot of assists can't be like detracting from team basketball, but actually like assists are, you know, one of the Cavs players anonymously told the media last week that he thinks a problem with their offense, which is kind of weird because they're still top 5 in offense and they should only be talking about defense really when they talk about problems. But one of the Cavs players anonymously told the press that he thinks it's a big problem on offense that LeBron won't pass unless he thinks it's going to lead to an assist. So certainly like with Russ and LeBron, I think these high assist numbers can actually correlate with having the ball in their hands way too much, and therefore a lot of their passes are leading to shots.
Makes sense.
Something I wanna circle back to real quick is we mentioned the Lakers, and I agree. I think LeBron wants to win a title, but for some reason I'm starting to get the impression, just based on what I can kind of perceive what's on. I hate citing Twitter and the blogs and everything, but kind of what the LeBron camp always seems to be saying. LeBron seems to kind of be in the market for a market, if that makes sense. And I'm starting to think that the glimmer of LA, obviously he's not going to the Knicks, but kind of that New York, LA, big city market seems to be something he's really, really interested in. And I'm wondering at this point, is he more interested in building towards his future? I mean, you guys know that he's very active with his branding, with all these different organizations he's part of. We know he's starting to become an entrepreneur. Do you guys really think it's all about the title, or at this point is LeBron trying to set himself up for age 40 and beyond?
Yeah, I really think it's the latter, and for that reason, I tend to believe these LeBron to the Lakers whispers that we're hearing more and more of, because I mean he just bought his second home in Los Angeles. We already know he's a prolific investor. He bought early in a lot of different ventures. I'm thinking of like Blaze Pizza, for example, that have really made a lot of money for him. He's talked about wanting to get into entertainment stuff. I mean, he's been an athlete who's been very, very smart and savvy with his money, kind of like Andre Iguodala. And for that reason, I think it's very possible that as he starts to kind of see the sun set on his career, he's thinking about his next move. And Los Angeles is a pretty natural place to make that happen, given his business interests. So I think there's something to that, Pete.
Well, and I think something else we have to realistically think about, obviously LeBron James is not strapped for cash, but he's going to start trying to set his son up, who right now is going to have to go to college somewhere in order to be big. And we know that he's obviously a fan of the Ohio State Buckeyes, but he has a lot of fans out there in California. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a little bit of that playing into it as well, of where does he want his family to start to become pillars of the community again. Obviously, he loves Akron.
Do you think LeBron's son could play in LeVar Ball's developmental league?
I think the internet would break.
I know I would break. I would never watch professional sports again.
To get to a bit of a different topic, we'll have a lot of time to speculate this summer about what LeBron's going to do. I think in the interest of time, we should skip over the Raptors and talk about them next time.
Sure.
Just want to flag that the Raptors point differential of plus 7.2 per game is only half a point worse than the Rockets and 3/4 of a point worse than the Warriors, and is 3 points better than anyone else in the NBA. And I think the Raptors are for real, and we should talk about that. But I think the topic we should hit for this podcast is just the fact that the NBA doesn't have emotional control over itself right now. We got just a series of incidents recently and throughout the season. We got the Rockets players stalking into the Clippers locker room to try to start some sort of post-game confrontation. We got Aaron Aflalo, the Magic, taking a wild swing at one of the backup forwards for the Timberwolves. Like Bobby Portis of the Bulls knocking out and breaking several facial bones of his own teammate at practice, Niko Mirotic. Kevin Durant with the unsightly 2 technicals for cursing out a ref and chasing him down the court in a game last week, which Durant, to be fair, apologized for the next day. So I think I want to get your guys' take on this, but my view is just that the NBA is letting this happen by not having the punishments be severe enough, and players are getting away with this stuff enough that they just aren't being deterred. So, the incidents I just mentioned, which is only a subset of the incidents for the year, the Rockets-Clippers, 4 or 5 Rockets went to the Clippers locker room. They took some sort of back tunnel at Staples Center. Only 2 of them got suspended, Gerald Green and Trevor Ariza. Chris Paul and Harden both were part of this and didn't get suspended, presumably because they're superstars, and there were 2 national TV games coming up that week for the Rockets, which I thought was just a terrible message for the league to send. Similarly, Christmas Day, Kevin Durant picked up a technical in the first 5 minutes of the game. Later in the first quarter, he shoved a basketball in the face of one of the Cavs, which is like an obvious technical. Yeah. And with Steph already out and the Christmas Day game that they advertised for a month, the NBA really didn't want to kick him out of the game, and so he didn't get penalized for this maneuver. Aaron Aflalo throwing a crazy wild punch gets suspended 2 games. Bobby Portis breaking his teammate's bones gets suspended 8 games when his teammate missed 23 games with injury. So I think if the NBA wants to cut this down, I think they're just going to need to get a little bit more iron-fisted about it, because right now the guys are just not getting penalized for these unsightly bad behavior incidents.
Yeah, I think those are great points on the punishments. I think the second layer, not nearly as much of a problem, but still something that the NBA really needs to figure out here soon, is this ref versus player mentality that I don't remember it ever being like this, where it seems that you have players openly questioning the refs every game, complaining about technicals, receiving a lot more technicals than they have. It just seems like the entire mindset of the NBA is very individualistic and me versus the world, especially me versus the refs, and I think it's bleeding over into every aspect of the game right now, that everyone is just tense and aggressive because of it. And I think that the rest of the points you made were spot on, that there is such a chippiness problem. It's really distracting from the game right now. I think we're seeing levels like we only see occasionally in baseball against the umpires, and whenever we have referees calling games for the Patriots in the NFL. It really seems like it's the worst in the NBA right now, and it's really distracting to me as a dude who's a fan but not nearly as smart on the game as other people.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we all agree.
Yeah,
we can move on.
All right. Well, I think we are pretty much out of time. So you guys have anything else? That's a good garbage time segment. We didn't formally announce garbage time, but I think that's a great topic for it. You guys have anything else before we wrap up here?
I want to throw out.
Can I?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead,
I just want to throw out one quick thing. We had a fantastic discussion between the two of you on NBA draft prospects, and you guys hit 99% of the points I wanted to hit. Just a couple things I wanted to point out to you two and to all of our listeners out there. So in 2018, our top 10 prospects we're looking at coming out of college basketball, a sport I absolutely love. We have no Kentucky players in the top 10. We have no Grayson Allen in the top 10. And we're talking about Colin Sexton of Alabama in basketball as one of our top guys. And it's just a really, really fun season, and it's blowing my mind what we're seeing in terms of who's competitive and who's not. I'm going to root against Grayson Allen every day as long as I can, even though he's improved. But boy, I do not like watching that guy play basketball. So it's just really, really interesting for me this year. The one and dones of John Calipari are struggling a little in Lexington this year. So it's a weird year.
A couple things to add to that. First of all, this is nitpicking, but I do think Kevin Knox of Kentucky, a 6'9", three-point shooting forward, will eventually sneak into the bottom of the top 10 just because his skills are very relevant to the NBA right now. But the other thing I wanted to say is that two teams in the top of college hoops who don't have NBA draft prospects, who I really enjoy watching, who have polar opposite styles, are Virginia and West Virginia. Neither one of them has NBA prospects, and for multiple years in a row now have been right at the top, especially Virginia. Virginia's got the slow it down, play super calm basketball, and West Virginia has the most frenetic full court press. They sub guys in and out the whole game. Got a senior point guard, Javon Carter, who's just a spectacular defender, can also shoot and run the offense. So those two teams have been really fun to watch, and there's just a ton of great college hoops right now.
I love watching West Virginia because of that press, and it's so exciting. As a guy whose Hokies always lose to the Cavaliers, watching UVA play basketball is infuriating because they are so methodical and they are so good. I think this is a better UVA team than we've seen really in the Tony Bennett era. As an ACC guy, I'm pretty worried about how good they are. I also liked your point about Kevin Knox. I have him just on the outside. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is also a good one to watch in Kentucky, but crazy year. I was root for Bob Huggins at West Virginia. I think he's a lot of fun to watch.
Can I toss out one more super random thing for garbage time before we close up?
Yeah.
So one of my college classmates, Griff Whalen, who's a wide receiver in the NFL, most recently of the Baltimore Ravens, but was on the Indianapolis Colts for a while, went vegan a few years ago and started blogging about it. And he and a bunch of other vegan athletes have teamed up to make a documentary about being vegan and playing major, very manly sports and how they get their protein and, you know, nutrition, animal rights. As you guys know, I'm kind of an animal rights guy. Kind of it's maybe an understatement. So I watched this documentary, and it's definitely like straight up propaganda, but it's also got some good facts in it and some cool interviews with athletes. So it's called From the Ground Up. So, you know, if any one of our listeners is like veggie curious, then I encourage you to check it out.
Is that on Netflix?
It's on like Amazon, iTunes, Vudu.
Okay.
I think I watched it on Vudu.
Okay.
Veggie curious. Cool. I didn't know that was a thing. I learned something tonight.
There you go.
I just made it up.
I like it.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, that'll wrap it up for this week on Third String. I mentioned that Pete and I had that piece about the Super Bowl on medium.com/Third String, so go ahead and check that out. Also coming up in the next couple of weeks here, we have pitchers and catchers reporting for spring training 2018. So baseball season is right around the corner. We're going to start doing some kind of divisional previews on this podcast and on the blog soon. So stay tuned for that as well. And good luck watching the Super Bowl. Hope you have fun. And we will be back with more Third String soon. Thanks for listening. Follow along on Twitter at Third String Pod or my account at Zach Crippen. Ishan is at Ishan_Nath and Pete is at Pete_Lacleed. Until next time, this is Third String. Have a good week.